Good morning. As we enter into worship this morning, I just want to give you the opportunity to slow down your heart and mind and connect with the God who is, the God who sees us, the God who hears us. And also just to let you know that technology sometimes introduces things that we can't go back and fix. And that happened this week when the camera cut out like at the very end of when we were singing, and just want to let you know that happened so that you're not distracted by it. Hopefully you'll just be so delighted in the Lord and in His presence that you won't even notice. But if you do, don't let it bother you. Just continue in your worship to the Lord. Let me read to you just a call to worship this morning. Tune my heart, my mind, my life to your voice and to your melodies, O God. Lord, let such melodies penetrate my heart's defenses, gently revealing old wounds unto their eventual healings, gently stirring eternal longings unto the restoration of hope. Amen.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures of faith are never enough. You came along and put me back grace and brought me out of darkness. You have filled me with peace and ever mercy. You're my help in time of need. Lord, I can't help but sing. Savior, you have brought me near. You pulled me from the ashes. You have broken every curse. Blessed Redeemer, you have set this captive free. Lord, I can't help but sing. Yes. My confidence is your faithfulness, and I will rest in your promises. My confidence is your faithfulness, and I will rest in your promises. My confidence is your faithfulness, and I will rest in your promises. My confidence is your faithfulness. Faithful you are. saints adore thee, casting down their golden crowns around the glassy sea. Cherubim and seraphim falling down before thee, which words and ardent evermore shall be. Holy, 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 though the darkness hide thee, though the eye of sinful men thy glory may not see. Holy, thou art holy, there is none beside thee, perfect in power and love and purity. Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, and all thy works shall praise thy name in earth and sky and sea. Holy, holy, merciful and mighty, God in three persons, blessed Trinity. God in three persons, blessed Trinity.
This is the story of how I got $1 million in 1 week. Okay, good. Now I have your attention. Hey Living Hope, it's me again, Hunter. Just want to update you about the project I brought up several weeks ago called Modern Warfare. This is a reminder the project is still go and instructions on how to participate. The concept is pretty simple. All you have to do is record yourself shooting a water gun, and here are a few examples of that. First, go get yourself a water gun. This is my water gun, and this is a water gun. I promise. A first-person point of view. A third-person point of view. The coming days are going to be really hot, so this will be the ideal time to do it. There will be a link in the description of the service and in Faith Life to submit your videos. The due date for when we'll stop accepting videos is August 9th, so don't miss out.
Get your keyboards ready, it's Bible trivia time. We'll show you a multiple choice question and you type the correct answer into the live comment section. We're looking for a word, not just A, B, C, or D. Give yourself 1 point for each correct answer and 2 points if you answer correctly first. Ready? Let's go. All right, who released Peter from prison? Was it soldiers, friends, the disciples, or an angel? Remember, you need to type one of the words in, not just the letter. So you're going to type in the word soldiers, friends, disciples, or an angel. Who did it? Who brought Peter out? 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. It was an angel. Not a bad way to get out of prison. Who's the brother of the Apostle Peter? Ooh, John, Judas, James, or Andrew? Ooh, they got 3 J names in there. Is that tipping you off to something? I don't know. Could be. You always gotta wonder how these guys treated each other as they were young siblings, right? Alright, got 2 seconds left. Oh, they're throwing us off. It was Andrew. Matthew 4:18. All right, after his suffering, how many years did Job live? Not his total years, but years after his suffering. And that, we do know that specific number from the book of Job. You got 10 seconds to type in your response. Oh, those are some big numbers up there. This is a guy who lived a long time. Precisely 140 years after his suffering. Wow, that's an old dude. Who did Jesus raise from death after 4 days? Come on, you got this one. Peter, a young boy, his friend Lazarus, or Peter's mother? We got Peter in there twice. I don't know. It could be throwing you off, could be leading you down the right path. Who was it? 4, 3, 2, 1. It was Lazarus. All right, why did Moses run away from Pharaoh? Pharaoh found out Moses was a Hebrew, or Moses wanted to live with the Hebrews, not Pharaoh. Moses discovered he was a Hebrew, or Moses killed an Egyptian, so Pharaoh planned to kill him. All right, we got it. Got a few more seconds. Type it in. That's right, it was after Moses killed an Egyptian because he saw him abusing a Hebrew. Alright, then Samson went to visit his wife during the time of the wheat harvest, naturally. What did he bring with him? Did he bring wheat and flax, a young goat, fine clothes, silver and gold? I imagine, this is apple blossom time for them. He's got to bring his girl something. What do you get the girl who has everything? Well, of course, you get her a young goat. Naturally, what every girl truly wants in her heart of hearts. What did God create on the fourth day? Land, animals, and man, fish and birds, separated land and sea, or the sun, moon, and stars? Which is it? You got 10 seconds to type in your answer now. Last one, you got this. 2, 1. Sun, moon, and stars. That's right. Day 1 was light and dark. Day 2 was the sky. Day 3 was land and plants. Amazing. All right, we'll catch you next time. On our way back from ministering to some beloved international workers, Anna and I had the opportunity to visit one of the oldest temples in South Korea. We visited the Bakunsa Temple, which was established by Buddhist priest Wanghyo in 670 AD. Our small tour group was led by a Buddhist monk who showed us things on the grounds and explained Buddhist thought and practice. At one point, we were all ushered into a temple and shown a very old and delicate statue of Buddha, which he was proud to tell us was basically an overlaid papier-mâché idol. He asked us to remove our shoes in the temple, which we did out of respect. He then demonstrated how he worshipped the idol by bowing to it, praying to it, using incense, and presenting plastic fruit as a sacrifice to the 2-foot-tall god. We guests were then invited to follow his lead and offered our own plastic fruit to present to this historic Buddha. It was a little surreal for us. We had never actually been in a situation where we were truly expected to worship an actual idol. We weren't tempted to worship this foreign god, but it was truly awkward not to bow when everyone else did, and there were only probably 6 or 7 of us there. As politely as we possibly could, we did not accept the fruit offered to us, and we respectfully took our shoes outside. Thankfully, the monk understood our conscientious objection and was very gracious toward us, retracting the offer, smiling and respectfully bowing to us in turn as we left the temple. We had no desire to make a mockery of something the monk clearly held in high esteem, and he had no intent to force us to worship as he did, though he clearly hoped we would. See, it's common among people of faith to honor each other's beliefs and practices even when we know they are incompatible. During the time period of the book of Daniel, when one nation conquered another, it was not uncommon for the victors to take items from the temples of the conquered people. Since warfare was often viewed as one god against another, it was an undeniable symbol of one people and their god having conquered another. We're jumping a gap of time when we go from Daniel chapter 4 to chapter 5. We just read their highly revered king Nebuchadnezzar's personal letter, but now he's passed away. A couple kings have had short-lived stints in Babylon's throne, but at this point his grandson, Nabonidus, is ruling. There's no mention of Nabonidus in the Bible, but cuneiform records attest to his rulership during this time period and his living in Tema for 10 years during his 21-year reign. So while he was away, his son, Belshazzar, was placed in charge of Babylon as co-regent, acting as king under his father. Belshazzar sounds a lot like the name they gave Daniel, Belteshazzar, because they're both in honor of the Babylonian god Bel, but they're not the same person. Don't sweat it too much. Thankfully, the writer always uses the name Daniel in this chapter, which helps keeps us from getting confused. We'll just get in our heads that Daniel is Daniel and Belshazzar is now the acting king of Babylon at this point in the story, and we're good to go. Okay, I mentioned earlier how conquering nations would take important religious objects from those they conquered. That's what happened when Babylon conquered Judah. They took special gold and silver items used for worship from Yahweh's temple. It was definitely a disgrace, but even so, there were rules. Taking objects was one thing, but desecrating them or making a public mockery of them was another, and that was seriously bad form. Well, this new king ignores that memo. So Yahweh writes him a new one he can't ignore. Let's open our hearts, minds, and Bibles to Daniel chapter 5. Okay, so here's what you gotta know about Belshazzar. He's not his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar. He hasn't developed any technology, built anything, or conquered anyone. He's riding the coattails of his forefathers big time. He's a trust fund baby. He was born in the royal family, so he's probably been famous his whole life. Everything he has, the incredible house, the world-inspiring garden all around him, the decadent foods from all over, the clothes, the chariots, the jewelry, it's all because of those who went before him. He's not known for military victories or much of anything as far as we can tell, but one thing he's known for? Throwing a killer party. Verse 1. King Belshazzar held a great feast for 1,000 of his nobles and drank wine in their presence. 1,000 nobles. Scholars agree that's probably a round number, not an exact one. I imagine I'd lose count somewhere after the 800th person, too. These weren't boys drinking PBR from red Solo cups and munching on pizza rolls. This was a massive, high-class, Great Gatsby-style party. Anybody who's anybody was there. If you weren't someone, you weren't getting in. The place was probably decked out in high fashion with everyone wearing their classiest clothes and jewelry. Then things start to get sloppy with the king in verses 2 to 3. Under the influence of the wine, Belshazzar gave orders to bring in the gold and silver vessels that his predecessor Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem so that the king and his nobles, wives, and concubines could drink from them. So they brought in the gold vessels that had been taken from the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, wives, and concubines drank from them. He may not have the war stories, but Belshazzar was making a huge splash by giving his guests an experience not even his forefathers gave them. The masterfully crafted, one-of-a-kind golden vessels that from Yahweh's holy temple in Jerusalem were something the visitors probably knew about or maybe even saw, but precious few people in the world had ever touched them. Nobody actually drank from them. That would be like passing the Pope's hat around for all the drunk people at a concert to take selfies with. No matter your faith, it's a huge foul, but this crowd is absolutely drinking it up. Not content with desecrating things specifically set apart for the service of Yahweh, in verse 4, they drank the wine and praised their gods made of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Wow. But wait. Did they just say gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone? Remind anyone of a certain dream and a prophecy from an earlier chapter? One about a statue, a line of rulers that got weaker with each generation. Remember what happened to that statue? I love it when the writer uses foreshadowing. This book is so fantastically written. But on to the best and creepiest part. Floating severed fingers. Yeah, verses 5 through 6. At that moment, the finger of a man's hand appeared and began writing on the plaster of the king's palace wall next to the lampstand. As the king watched the hand that was writing, his face turned pale and his thoughts so terrified him that his hip joint shook and his knees knocked together. The Aramaic here literally says that the knots of his joints were loosened. This is translated in various ways, but basically, he's lost control of his bodily functions here. Verse 7. The king called out. Some translate this as cried out, to bring in the mediums, Chaldeans, and astrologers. He said to these wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this inscription and gives me its interpretation will be clothed in purple, have a gold chain around his neck, and have the third highest position in the kingdom." One of the major themes we've seen in this book revolves around what we trust in. Show me what you grab for when you're panicked and I'll show you your God. In this case, Belshazzar is showing us exactly what he's trusting in to save him. Hey, when there's a problem, throw money at it. Oh, and let's kick in some authority and status to boot. Can't say I blame the guy. Money and clout definitely get things done. He grew up in the palace, and I'm sure just about every problem he ever had was solved with cash or his status in the family. It's all he knows. No doubt you picked up. We've got a repeating story going on here. It's almost like they're new characters saying the same lines, foreshadowing again. Let's check out verses 8 through 12. So all the king's wise men came in, but none could read the inscription or make its interpretation known to him. Then King Belshazzar became even more terrified. His face turned pale, and his nobles were bewildered. Because of the outcry of the king and his nobles, the queen came to the banquet hall. "May the king live forever," she said. "Don't let your thoughts terrify you or your face be pale. There's a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the days of your predecessor, he was found to have insight, intelligence, and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods. Your predecessor, King Nebuchadnezzar, appointed him chief of the diviners, mediums, Chaldeans, and astrologers. Your own predecessor, the king, did this because Daniel, the one the king named Belteshazzar, was found to have an extraordinary spirit, knowledge, and perception, and the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems. Therefore, summon Daniel, and he will give you the interpretation." The queen mentioned here is likely not his wife. His wives are mentioned before as being in the party. This woman is probably his mother, the wife of Nabonidus. She's the old guard. She's been around, and she remembers things. It's kind of a slam on him that his mom shows up to help fix things, but Belshazzar is definitely losing his cool. She came because they were all yelling and freaking out. He had so publicly and obviously lost his courage and body function that she had to step in. It's not fitting for a king to get sloppy drunk in front of his guests, then shriek in front of the most powerful people in the land. She told him not to let his thoughts terrify him and let his face get pale, but sounds to me like she's saying as respectfully as possible, "Pull yourself together, son. You're embarrassing yourself and the throne. Here, I know a guy." Had Belshazzar not been paying attention to his history lessons? Remember how our four Judeans were indoctrinated in Babylonian literature, culture, and language so they could serve in the king's court? It was absolutely customary for potential heirs to the throne to receive similar, if not more rigorous training and understand their country's history. The fact that he not only didn't make use of Daniel, but didn't even know he existed, is significant. He takes the queen's advice and calls him in verse 13. Then Daniel was brought before the king. The king said to him, "Are you Daniel, one of the Judean exiles that my predecessor the king brought from Judah?" Not a good start. Instead of addressing him as the appointed leader of all the wise men and personal advisor to Nebuchadnezzar, he reminds him of his status as being a man from a conquered land. Then he puts him to the test, 14 through 16. "I've heard that you have the spirit of the gods in you, and that you have insight, intelligence, and extraordinary wisdom. Now the wise men and mediums were brought before me to read this inscription and make its interpretation known to me, but they could not give its interpretation. However, I've heard about you, that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Therefore, if you can read this inscription and give me its interpretation, you'll be clothed in purple, have a gold chain around your neck, and have the third highest position in the kingdom." Belshazzar summoned him and saw an old man into the room, and he may have written him off. We'll see in verse 17 that Daniel is none too impressed with Belshazzar either. Then Daniel answered the king, "You may keep your gifts and give your rewards to someone else. However, I will read the inscription for the king and make the interpretation known to him." Did you notice how Daniel does not address him with the normal greetings when one approaches the king? Even the queen greeted him by saying, "May the king live forever," but Daniel doesn't bother. He seems to already know what Yahweh has spoken and won't waste his breath, foreshadowing for the win again. I love his response to the prizes too. Belshazzar already showed deep disrespect for the God Daniel trusted in, and now Daniel was returning the gesture by refusing money and power. He essentially told Belshazzar, "You don't have anything I need." Yahweh is not moved by money, and Daniel's services were not up for the highest bidder. It was time for Belshazzar to pull up a chair and go back to school. He may have known stories about his grandfather, but Daniel was there, up close and personal. Verses 18 through 21. "Your Majesty, the Most High God gave sovereignty, greatness, glory, and majesty to your predecessor Nebuchadnezzar. Because of the greatness he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages were terrified and fearful of him. He killed anyone he wanted and kept alive anyone he wanted. He exalted anyone he wanted and humbled anyone he wanted. But when his heart was exalted and his spirit became arrogant, he was deposed from his royal throne and his glory was taken from him. He was driven away from people and his mind was like an animal's. He lived with the wild donkeys, he was fed grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with dew from the sky until he acknowledged that the Most High God is ruler over the kingdom of men and sets anyone he wants over it." If there was ever a powerful man in Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar was it. Belshazzar hadn't done anything near what his grandfather did, so he had far fewer reasons to be arrogant. Daniel's brief history lesson may have met with some eye-rolling on Belshazzar. Of course he had already heard all of this, probably lots of times. And so the trap is set. 22 through 25. "But you, his successor, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, even though you knew all this. Instead, you've exalted yourself against the Lord of heaven. The vessels from his house were brought to you, and as you and your nobles, wives, and concubines drank wine from them, you praised the gods made of silver and gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or understand, but you have not glorified the God who holds your life breath in his hands and who controls the whole course of your life. Therefore he sent the hand And this writing was inscribed. This is the writing that was inscribed. Mine mine tekel parsin. The strange message written on the wall is mina mina, a shekel, and 2 halves, either a half mina or half shekel. These are all units of measurement and currency they would have been familiar with. They were coins, which were literally worth their weight in gold because they were made of gold or silver. The mina was a coin that was worth about 50 shekels. This is by no means an attempt at accurate translation, but it might feel similarly confusing if today the hand wrote 100, a dollar, a 50-cent piece. They would have understood the words perfectly, but been baffled on what it meant. But like he'd done before, God spoke to Daniel's mind and told him exactly what he meant by his writing on the wall. 26 through 31. This is the interpretation of the message. Mine means that God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel means that you have been weighed in the balance and found deficient. Perez means that your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then Belshazzar gave an order, and they clothed Daniel in purple, placed a gold chain around his neck, and issued a proclamation concerning him that he should be the 3rd ruler in the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom at the age of 62. Not only did God reveal to Daniel the meaning of the writing, but Daniel seemed to know that God was going to bring about Belshazzar's end very quickly. He didn't wish him a long life when he came into his royal presence for the first time, which was odd. But if God, who appoints and destroys rulers, says he's taken this guy out, who is Daniel to blow against a hurricane? It would also support his indifference to the offer Belshazzar had made him for riches and power. He'd received similar things from a previous king, but in this case, he seemed to know this king wasn't going to be around long enough for any of it to matter. And he wasn't. That, church family, is the part about this story that makes my knees shake. Belshazzar didn't get 12 months to mull things over like Nebuchadnezzar did. It was expected that Belshazzar would have read the letter his forefather had left him and learned from that lesson. We read that letter last week in chapter 4. The message Nebuchadnezzar sent was as clear as the writing on the wall, but Belshazzar had ignored it. Instead, making an open mockery of the Most High God of heaven, he had been specifically warned not to take lightly. From beyond the grave, in black and white, Nebuchadnezzar told his people not to place their hope in anything but Yahweh. I found a letter from our nation's forefathers I want to share with you. Like Nebuchadnezzar's letter, there's no doubt the ruler who wrote it intended future generations like ours to read it and learn from it. Also, in similar fashion, the letter was widely distributed so that each citizen would receive the message. It began as a resolution presented in the Senate on March 2nd, 1863, by Senator James Harlan of Iowa. The resolution asked President Lincoln to proclaim a national day of humiliation, prayer, and fasting. I will read the entirety of the official proclamation that resulted and show its text as it originally appeared. In the background behind the text, you'll see an example of the letter that went out in 1863. In this particular case, it was preceded by a proclamation from Governor John Andrew of Massachusetts, especially invoking the attention of all ministers of the gospel, as well as all the good people of Massachusetts, urging them to follow the president's request. If you're interested, I have posted a link to this image on Faith Life. By the President of the United States of America, a proclamation. Whereas the Senate of the United States, devoutly recognizing the supreme authority and just government of Almighty God, in all the affairs of men and of nations has, by a resolution, requested the President to designate and set apart a day for national prayer and humiliation. And whereas it is the duty of nations as well as of men to own their dependence upon the overruling power of God, to confess their sins and transgressions in humble sorrow, yet with assured hope that genuine repentance will lead to mercy and pardon, and to recognize the sublime truth announced in the Holy Scriptures and proven by all history, that those nations only are blessed whose God is the Lord. And insomuch as we know that, by his divine law, nations like individuals are subjected to punishments and chastisements in this world, may we not justly fear that the awful calamity of civil war, which now desolates the land, may be but a punishment inflicted upon us for our presumptuous sins, to the needful end of our national reformation as a whole people? We have been the recipients of the choicest bounties of heaven. We've been preserved these many years in peace and prosperity. We've grown in numbers, wealth, and power as no other nation has ever grown, but we have forgotten God. We've forgotten the gracious hand which preserved us in peace and multiplied and enriched and strengthened us. And we have vainly imagined in the deceitfulness of our hearts that all these blessings were produced by some superior wisdom and virtue of our own. Intoxicated with unbroken success, we have become too self-sufficient to feel the necessity of redeeming and preserving grace, too proud to pray to the God that made us. It behooves us then to humble ourselves before the offended power, to confess our national sins, and to pray for clemency and forgiveness. Now, therefore, in compliance with the request, and fully concurring in the views of the Senate, I do, by this my proclamation, designate and set apart Thursday, the 30th day of April, 1863, as a day of national humiliation, fasting, and prayer. And I do hereby request all the people to abstain on that day from their ordinary secular pursuits, and to unite at their several places of public worship and in their respective homes, in keeping the day holy to the Lord, and devoted to the humble discharge of the religious duties proper to that solemn occasion. All this being done, in sincerity and truth, let us then rest humbly in the hope authorized by the divine teachings, that the united cry of the nation will be heard on high and answered with blessings no less than the pardon of our national sins and the restoration of our now divided and suffering country to its former happy condition of unity and peace. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the United States to be affixed. Done at the city of Washington this 13th day of March in the year of our Lord 1863, and of the independence of the United States the 87th, by the President, Abraham Lincoln, William H. Seward, Secretary of State. I want to weep when I read that. Can you imagine our Senate drafting and presenting this request? Our president didn't just agree to their request, but Lincoln agreed with the premise behind it, fixing the seal of our nation to it. They enacted this day of humility, prayer, and fasting 30 days after this proclamation went out, which is extremely fast considering the speed of their communication methods. Did you catch that? They were a divided nation at war with itself over issues of race, power, and prosperity, and they considered the violence as right punishment from God for their sins of arrogance, disregarding God's authority, and failing to recognize him as the giver of all blessings and wisdom. Part of me wishes I hadn't read that letter. I mean, I'm glad I did, but here are my forefathers telling me very clearly that the only hope we have as people is in the Lord. And now I'm responsible for what I know. I am Belshazzar. You are. We are. And we have received Nebuchadnezzar's letter. Can we compare what we've accomplished recently to what our nation's forefathers built? We're living in the palaces they constructed. The parties we throw today are because of them and those serving them. They were not shining examples of godliness, but neither was Nebuchadnezzar. I'm not justifying or turning a blind eye to the many sins of our nation's predecessors, but I'm not writing off what they're teaching us either. As Nebuchadnezzar proclaimed in 560 BC and President Lincoln proclaimed in 1863 AD, the only one belonging on a pedestal for the success of our nation up to this point is the same one who established Babylon. It is God, and God alone. He has pierced me with something. He showed me that I'm also like Belshazzar in what my heart trusts during times of fear and uncertainty. When I started to get anxious about upcoming elections, social unrest, further shutdowns, and loss of income, he gently revealed that my thoughts immediately jumped to things like my house, investments, savings, the community I live in, and so on. When I start to panic because I see the writing on the wall, I too throw money at it, easing my thoughts with all these things which God has so generously provided. Things that can so quickly go away. How about you? What's your knee-jerk reaction to a grim situation? What does your heart surround itself with and run to for protection? Stimulus checks? Stable job? Forgivable loans? A candidate? A massive policy change? The right to bear arms? We're Americans, and our money and power have always saved us in the past, or so it may seem. All along, it has been God, and God alone, who establishes us, sustains us, and protects us by His own hand and for His pleasure. In light of all this, how could I not call for a time of humiliation, prayer, and fasting? This Wednesday, August 5th, we will observe such a day to remember and honor the King of Heaven. There are multiple ways to fast, so don't complicate it. Don't worry if you have no idea how to do a day of prayer. I think that's the point. You can't do anything. The fast is to remind ourselves of exactly that and to retrain our thoughts to fix on the one who is our hope. If all you do this Wednesday is let every urge to eat, drink, or whatever it is you fast from remind you of the one who supplies your every need, you're doing great. Let it trigger a word of gratitude, worship, surrender. Let it flow into prayers that our nation's leaders will once again be humble people who openly acknowledge and trust in the Lordship of Christ, throwing off confidence in anything else and leading we the people to do the same. We will end the day as we normally do with Wednesday night worship at 7 p.m. We'll gather in person at Living Hope and stream live to YouTube from the church building. By Wednesday morning, links will be emailed out and made available on Faith Life and our Facebook page, so you can sign up to come in person or join via YouTube. If you do not get our update emails and would like to, just let me know and I'll include you in those. I encourage you to use a journal, notepad on your phone, or whatever means you have available to record the thoughts and prayers God brings to your mind this week, and especially on Wednesday as we prepare to gather. God often reveals Himself to us through each other. Come prepared to share your prayers and join in the prayers of others. Bring your songs. Bring your scriptures. Bring hearts that are humble and ready to honor the King of heaven. And now, if you would hold out your empty hands, I will speak a blessing over you that comes from Revelation 1:4-6. Grace and peace to you from the one who is, who was, and who is coming, from the seven spirits before his throne, and from Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the firstborn from the dead and the ruler of the kings of the earth. To him who loves us and has set us free from our sins by his blood and made us a kingdom, priests to his God and Father. The glory and dominion are his forever and ever. And all God's people said, Amen. God bless you. We'll see you Wednesday.
So last night, my brother's family came over and they have Disney Plus, so they logged into that on our. So now we have Disney Plus. Nice.
I love Disney Plus.
I was like, what's on this? Because we finished watching Mandalorian, which was pretty rad. Yeah. Baby Yoda. Let's see. I should tell Hunter. Hunter, this is another in the fire. We're actually going to reprise the Dry Bones, but this is another in the fire. Torch. This is fire. Oh, okay.
Sounded a lot like meat mail before that.
I really was hooked, though, on the first line. I was just going, that is so me right now. I just, got sucked in. No, we are pretty unique, and I'm so thankful that
We're unique way.
we're just giving hope. In Wenatchee.
Hunter, this is Sea of Victory right in to build my life. Oh, love it. Delicious. And nutritious. 5 out of 5 moms agree worship. No, 4 out of 5 moms agree that worship is good for you. And the other one is the Satanist. Good? We're good? This is Won't Stop Now. Wow, that's very... It's like, did I hit my microphone on accident? No, I should have hit my drummer. Just son of me punching in the face, dude. That was awesome right there. Okay. Oh, I know. Breakthrough is coming. Mm-hmm.
This is how we fight our battles.
This is how we fight our battles. Boom. All right. We're doing Billie Jean, actually. Change of plan. Yeah, there we go. Abby throws down. Oh, Abby throws down Mac Jackson. Sweet. She was more like a Billy Queen from movie scene. Said, no man, what do you mean I am the one? Gonna dance on the floor and around. That reminded me of a little blue dog in the cartoon. The blue.
was it Bullwinkle? I think it was Bullwinkle, that little blue duck. The mischievous little blue duck.